It's like, all right. Well, there we go. Good evening. Glad all of you are here with us tonight. Do want to announce before we jump into a couple of books of the Bible that we're going to discuss briefly. The new class for, late 20s and down, I guess, like college and early into your adult life age, will be starting tonight, and that will be over in the office classroom. And so the easiest way to get there is probably going to be to go out through the fellowship building and then the door that heads into the offices. So go through the fellowship building. If you don't know what I'm talking about, someone will just point at the door for you, and they can help you get there. And we're excited about that opportunity. Also, please do not forget that there is going to be an opportunity out at the Fig Pen Farm to watch fireworks tomorrow. The get-together will start at about 6:30. If you want to fish, bring a pole. Not want some bait or lures of some kind as well. It's hard to catch anything without that. There's going to be some snacks, s'mores, things like that. There's nothing like s'mores when the heat index is about 100, right? But it'll still be fun. They still taste just as good even when it's hot outside. And so we'll be doing that. And then after it gets dark, the fireworks show, you might want like some bug spray of some kind. You might want to bring a chair. And if you can make sure you do those couple of things, you can probably stay somewhat comfortable out there. And look forward to that time together. We're thankful to be able to go out to the Fig Pen Farm again this year. We are talking about 2 books tonight. We've got 6 books left in the Old Testament. And what I'd hoped all along is by, halfway through July, or at the latest at the end of July, we would be through the Old Testament so we can spend a little bit more time asking some questions, going through some of those New Testament books. Tonight, we're talking about 2 more minor prophets. Now again, I've asked this question for several weeks in a row. What is the difference between a major prophet and a minor prophet? Raise your hands if you know the difference between a major prophet and a minor prophet. You got it, Lincoln? What is it?
The minor prophet is as good as the major.
Nope, that's not it. It's not that they're not as good, but that's a good try. It sounds like that, right? It sounds they're just minor. Chap. The major prophets are longer. It all has to do with the length of the book. So a major prophet is longer. That's right. Look at him, Jacob. You boy got it. There you go. A major prophet's longer. Minor prophet's shorter. Now, if we go to college and you want to get a major in a certain area of study, you might also have a little interest in something else, and you can get what in that other something else? What would that be? A minor. Now, are you as well versed in what you got a minor in as what you got a major in? Not according to the studies that you did, right, in school. And so that's a lot of times the way we think about a major and a minor. Something that is major is way more important, it's better. Something that's minor, it's not as important, it's not as good. But in the Bible, when we talk about major prophets and minor prophets, all it has to do with is the length of the book. So, Nahum, however you want to pronounce that. All I want you to remember about the book of Nahum is that it points out how much God cares about innocent people. There are innocent people that have had their lives taken, and God is so compassionate about that, and also passionate about the justice that He wants to see take place because of how much He cares for innocent people. All right, so the theme of Nahum, if we were going to say it, what is it? God cares about innocent people. There you go. All right, so what is the theme of the book of Nahum? God cares about innocent people. There we go. All right, and so then what comes next? Nahum and Habakkuk. It's one of those fun names. I've always thought that Habakkuk was a fun name. Habakkuk is really interesting because in most of the prophets, major and minor, what we find is that God gives the words to the prophet to tell the people. But Habakkuk is interesting because what we see is that Habakkuk is talking to God. There's a conversation between the two of them and not to the people of God. And so it's an interesting dynamic. And so I would encourage you to go and read that book, Nahum as well, but read those couple of books and see just how neat that is. So what is one really neat thing about Habakkuk that we don't find in all the other prophets? Habakkuk is talking to God. All right, so what's one really neat thing that we find in Habakkuk that we don't in all the rest of those prophets? Habakkuk is talking to God. It's a really neat thing that goes on in there in that book. Next week, Jacob is going to get up here and do a brief synopsis of the next couple of minor prophets. We will have about 20 from here that are over in Henderson for Horizons. There's also going to be a few that are at Mid-South next week. So there's going to be quite a substantial number from Pulaski Street that are in Henderson, Tennessee next week. But Jacob will be up here to give a synopsis of the next couple books, and you could probably just be ready to do the J-O-Y song. You know, I'm guessing that'll probably take place. With that in mind, a song, let's all stand up. We're going to sing one real quick before we head to class. I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly o'er the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir! I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir! I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir! I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly o'er the enemy, but I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir! And now you can march your way to Bible class.
Well, good evening. I heard one good evening. Hopefully it's a good evening for everybody. I'm giving the guys up in the crow's nest a good fit. I formatted in a way that is not easily unraveled, and trying to be able to get a picture heavy laden PowerPoint over to everybody, and so I may have flubbed the dub, and then I usually have a backup stick, and my backup stick's in the back of my computer at work, and so we'll just go through. If they get it figured out, fine, and we'll do some of the pictures. But boy, we got a lot to cover, and a very good study ahead of us this quarter. And so we're glad you're here in the auditorium class. As you can see, we do have 1 Timothy working, and we'll. I don't know if I'm controlling or if y'all are controlling. You may have heard 1 Timothy being mentioned and grouped with the phrase that it's one of the pastoral epistles. And when we're talking about the pastoral epistles, we're talking about 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus. And so these books written by Paul to two young men, two young preacher men, two young men that Paul belovedly calls my sons in the faith. He had converted them, and he held a close relationship with them. And Timothy was Exhibit A on being circumcised for expediency's sake. And now I'm getting spotlights. And Titus was Exhibit B on, no, you can't enforce circumcision. This fellow had no Jewish ancestry in his family tree, and you're not going to strong-arm him into that procedure, that relic of the law. And so they figure prominently in the life of Paul. Now, pastoral simply means shepherding. And in these letters, they're kind of unique because they're written to individuals who are preachers, evangelists, ministers. They're not written to churches like Colossae, Corinth, places like that. And certainly we have some individuals like Philemon who had letters written to them by Paul that were members of congregations. But this is very interesting and very instructive for us today in the 21st century. So pastoral in the sense that Paul is shepherding these young men and guiding them in this important work. This whole lesson, we're going to just take opportunity to sort of shake hands with 1 Timothy before we get into the subsequent lessons in future Wednesday nights together, and try to appreciate the context. We're using a group of studies as our base, and the outlines I'll credit to. I wish I could say this gentleman's name. I was going to write it down here, but he's started a online thing called Bible TV, Bible Talk TV, and very sound, very good instruction, and you can go online and see this very lesson, very well done from what I can see. But one interesting thing he does, he has us to think about the church and its development in three phases. And fellows, if you, I got it. How about that? Those guys are good. He describes the church in the first century in three phases. One is the inception. That, of course, was Acts 2, day of Pentecost. 3,000 baptized right there in the city of Jerusalem. Then there is expansion, and you know that growth formula given there in Acts. You're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth. Well, as it happened, things continued to grow, especially in the Jewish community early on. Then there was Cornelius. There may have been others. First we know about Samaria. And when the Greek congregations got established, especially up in Syria, north of Jerusalem, up in Syria at Antioch, and incidentally, that's where that bad earthquake happened in 2023. That part is no longer in Syria. That's considered part of Turkey. Some 50,000, 60,000 folks were killed in that earthquake. It's in that area where disciples were first called Christians, Antioch of Syria. And they sponsored these missionary tours. They were more missionary minded. You know, the Jews had more of an idea of, we'll proselyte you. But the Jewish religion, there was a lot of things about it that weren't good news for other peoples. The gospel is good news. Judaism had aspects that were not particularly good. It was good and perfect for what God intended it to do, but it was not one that was easily broadcast to the rest of the world. And so we have expansion. Then at the time that we're looking at the writing of these books, sometime in the little period there in Paul's life when he was released from the house arrest that we leave him in at the end of Acts, and the time that he is rearrested in 2 Timothy and doesn't have any hope of getting out in along about AD 64. So he had expressed an interest to want to go to Spain. Probably never had time to do that. But instead he went back and revisited, reestablished these congregations, helped them get leadership in place. How in the world are we supposed to do church? That's what he tells Timothy about. And so he deals in this consolidation phase with, you're now self-supporting. You're not being supported by people somewhere else. You now have men among you who can be leaders and elders and teachers and various people, and a way of doing things that sees you through kind of the miraculous start to the church and to the very practical nuts and bolts of being God's people. So we see Paul returning. We could look at Crete in 1 Timothy 1:5 to Ephesus, various places, but he wrote this first epistle to Timothy, a young evangelist, probably in his early 30s at this point in his life, in a metropolitan city, Ephesus, and so that's part of that background. Now we ask this: who was Timothy? We meet Timothy in Acts 16, verse 1. There in the city of Lystra, as Paul was on his second missionary journey, what we style his second missionary journey. This is in the area of Asia Minor, and I'll have a couple of maps come up here in a minute. Modern day Turkey, that little rectangular part up there, modern day Turkey. And he had a godly mother who was Jewish named Eunice. And she had been taught the scriptures by her godly mother, Lois, who was Timothy's grandmother, and they had both taught him the scriptures. And so he knew he knew about God, and he was converted by Paul. 1 Timothy 1, verse 2, he calls him my son in the faith. And so this would be about AD 51. That all of that would have transpired, and Paul mentions that God's called you to ministry. He's one of these young men like our speaker Sunday that really all his life thought from the time he was converted at least. 1 Timothy 1:18 was going to preach, was going to teach. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14, it's interesting to note that Timothy was commended to his service not only by Paul, but by the elders. So we see the apostles who were chosen by Christ himself working hand in glove with elders where they were present. Remember back in Acts 15 when we had the council meeting and there were problems? It was the apostles. You had most of them living around in Jerusalem. The elders, and of course James is mentioned, perhaps other teachers and leaders. But very significant there in the way that that comes about. Timothy, of course, as we're going to see, was sent to Ephesus when Paul's plans changed. And I've got some pictures of that city that I want to show you here in just a minute. Tradition, not the Bible, tradition says that Timothy was martyred by either Emperor Nerva or Domitian. And before that, though, he was a co-worker with John. John, the beloved apostle, when Jerusalem The temple fell in AD 70. Christians were scattered further. John came to reside, tradition says, some 30 years in Ephesus. Ephesus became the center of the New Testament Christianity in the last part of the first century. Things kind of it was the hub, and there were spokes reaching out, but it was kind of the center. And so when Paul was martyred, Timothy had some time there with John, if our tradition is accurate. Okay, let's talk about Ephesus. As most of you know, Dawn and Heather and I were able to go visit the sites of the 7 churches of Asia, and Ephesus is a most impressive place. It was a booming metropolis, and this is a little bit plainer. Right here are the 7 churches. Right there is Lystra, Timothy's hometown. Let's see here. Okay. That's not the programmer's fault, that's me. All right. Right there's Tarsus, that's Saul's hometown. But right here in western Turkey, all this now is Turkey. So it's kind of like a state like Colorado. It was known as Asia Minor in that day. Here's a little better map. It may be a little small for you, and I think that's Paul's second missionary. No, that's his third journey that is being depicted there. But I wanted that so you could see how Ephesus was right there in the midst of what's happening. Across the Aegean Sea there is Greece, Macedonia kind of up north there, and then the Adriatic Sea, and there would be the boot-like peninsula of Italy. Okay, let's think about this place, and let's take a little journey. So, if you come in the eastern entrance to ancient Ephesus, and it's been archaeologically examined more than any other of these 7 churches for 150 years, and they figure they've only got about 15% of it exposed. There's a mountain range, not a huge mountain, but you can see in the distance. You see in the distance there that there's a mountain range on the left side, a fairly tall one, a significant one on the right that kind of fades out. And Ephesus is in this gorge, and we're in an earthquake-prone area, and so some of these excavations have to go down some 20 feet to get to the things on either side of this main highway. This road through there is marble. It's marbles in all those mountains, and so it's plenteous, and it's quite interesting. Note this little sidetrack here, and note this is the area where a lot of archaeological work is being done now. That's where some of the wealthier homes were, senators and rulers, and it's still a stone's throw, but not too far from that structure there. So you're going to go straight down there to that, and that's the library. And when you're here, you've been walking probably half a mile and zigzagging down through there. In Paul's day, that library had not yet been constructed, but they usually rebuilt in zones, and probably somewhere in that general vicinity was where the school of Tyrannus would have been that Paul taught at. And they usually built back in those areas. So we're going to go down there. I'm going to sidestep here and let you peek in there. We're going to go right in front of that library. We're going to look right and go see what is out here. But just around, down through there, in Paul's day would have been the Aegean Sea. The sea came right up to about right there. So they had a seaport. It's silted in now, and you got to go 7 miles before you get to the Aegean Sea from the way it was in Paul's day. And we'll go here. You can go this way to the Agora, that way to the harbor, and then the impressive theater is the other direction. Okay, quickly. Okay, why am I showing those clay pipes? Under the roads, they've got sewer drainage. I'll show you another situation in the homes. They had indoor plumbing. This was a modern city, and it is impressive. Right there's your public restroom in the day. Marble seats. We were told that this is where a lot of business got done, not just biological, but this is where the people, sat on the throne and got business tended to, talking to one another. Slaves would be requested to sit on the marble and pre-warm it before, masters sat down on it. Now, one thing that's not depicted here that is in some of the places we visited, you see these, and incidentally, these are not my photos. We've got them, but they're hard enough to format these. This is from a series of slides that I've had for a few years, and so I own the thing, and I can share them for non-commercial use. So that disclaimer. These are boards. They're working on this. Typically, there would be a little trough there. It would flow with vinegar and water, and they'd use a hyssop, dip it in that. Instead of Grandpa's corn cobs, they'd use that to clean up with after they had done business. Romans envied the Greeks. And you remember what the Roman guard offered Jesus to drink and what he used? It was a hyssop. If you thought there was any kindness in that man's heart with what he offered, it was an insult. He was taking what had been used to wipe somebody's behind and dip it in whatever narcotic containing concoction they had. So that puts a different complexion on that. No extra for that bit of information. I don't know how well this is going to show up. There are a lot of things going off through there, but this is a stone base where Emperor Domitian, his statue once sat on this. He was detested by his subjects. And one of his wives finally convinced one of the Praetorian guards to take him out and assassinate him. But many of the statues we saw at the museum and what have you, we'll have to get somebody else to operate it. See that? That's his name scratched out. They went through and they wanted to eliminate. And if you're a late dater on the book of Revelation, he would have been the one that sentenced John to the Isle of Patmos. Anybody got a crack at who this is? They're just idols of every kind in every city. I had in my mind that every city had a patron god, and that's kind of where everybody drifted to. They're left and right. What are we holding in that hand here? That's a wreath. Put you in mind of the Olympic Games. Does that resemble a check mark? You ever seen Tiger Woods play golf and the swish he has on it? The company he represents, Nike. This is the goddess Nike, the goddess of victory. Don't you guess that John had seen just about enough of this deity when he had his revelation, and he talked about the victory we have in Jesus. Some of these images that he had seen the latter part of his life must have paled. All right, we're scooting closer toward the library that you can't see, but toward those buildings on the left and the little sashaway there. I want you to look at the road. Look at. You got some. We build stuff. If we last a lifetime, it's wonderment. This was probably not there in Paul's day. This may have been added 2 or 3 centuries afterwards. But look at what you got. And then up in these buildings, there's a house for you and an entrance. How much of your plaster would be around 2 millennia later? And they're cleaning that stuff up, and it's quite amazing. Yeah, and this house had plumbing. That's right in the center there, one of those pipes. So it was quite the metropolis. And also, the thought came to me, it went up 3 stories high. Not hard to imagine that a young man named Eutychus, who might have been in a window up there, if he fell, who's going to survive that? Just food for thought. And then, as you come out of that particular ritzy area of town, you still got just a little walkway, and you're at this library that was not there in Paul's day. This is a couple hundred years before it's coming, but it's the kind of the central part. And I want you to look at this. We're going to do a right turn now, and these 3 arches, and they're a salute to some of the Roman emperors. If you see through this arch just a little bit, you can see we got another hill. That hill that was on our right kind of plays out, but there's going to be something going on. Right up the middle here, there's going to be the agora, which is where trade was done, where the novelties were sold, where artisans had their wares. The agora in Corinth was where Paul, Aquila, and Priscilla would have labored as tent makers. And then you can go left, and after you walk through these arches, and you go hop a boat right out into the Aegean Sea there and get to the Mediterranean. There's an aerial view, and I sure didn't take that. But this is the pathway going on up, and it'll go by the theater, but you can see the little nooks there where artisans were. If you took a left there, you would go to the harbor, and there she lies on our right. We walked up the left side, and we stood in the middle of that thing. In the back part of it, in its day, it would have had a tall wooden structure to project, but still the acoustics were pretty phenomenal. We had a brother Stanton with us. He'd sing a hymn at the drop of a hat, and he cranked up with Amazing Grace there, and Heather got some of that. She was up in the stands like some of those folks. It was a Roman law that your theater had to have the capacity to hold 10% of the town's population. If you exceeded that, you had to build a second one sometime. That happened at Laodicea. That's looking kind of northeast, and this is over there now looking back to the west, the way we kind of came up. And it's an impressive place. And here we got Timothy. Paul is leaving him, a man who has a little tendency to be somewhat timid, one who is not nearly as experienced as the Apostle Paul, who's capable of doing miracles and has been through a few lumps and bumps. Timothy, who has stomach problems, and if some of what he encounters in Ephesus isn't enough to give you ulcers, he really wouldn't be the poster child of who you would think. But let's talk about authorship just for a second. And for you and I, that's not a big deal. Critics want to say, "Oh, well, it doesn't fit with Acts." Well, no, it doesn't fit with Acts. It came about after the events of Acts, after his imprisonment in house arrest that we leave him at the end of chapter 28 in Acts. The early church fathers and first Christians assigned it, had no problems with it. You and I don't have a problem with it, and it certainly. Paul says he wrote it, and there's nothing to argue that he did not. Let's look quickly at an outline that, outlining this, there you'll see a lot of variations, and we're going to go with this particular study because there's a lot of personal encouragement to individuals along with teaching. You can outline this thing a lot of different ways. But he starts out with a greeting that we'll read momentarily. Talks about Paul and Timothy there in the remaining chapter of chapter 1. The church in prayer in chapter 2. That's a real important chapter, is it not? As it deals with that. The church in leadership. That's important. How we go about selecting leaders. We hope to have by the end of the year additional deacons selected as we look from among us. What are they to be about? What kind of people are they to be that you're to consider for such a work? He lays that out. Chapter 5, the church in apostasy. That means folks that have fallen away, folks that are doing wrong, folks that are not right and square with Scripture in the Old Testament, with inspired letters that are now circulating that will become part of our New Testament. And people you've got that still have direct revelation from God and speak the breath of God. All Scripture is inspired by God, Paul would write in chapter 3, verse 16. And it's profitable for some things, for doctrine, for reproof, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, mature, perfect, thoroughly furnished unto every good work. The church in different categories of people. What are you going to do about these different categories? And then his final appeal. Some things that these three letters teach us. The administration and organization of the church. Paul had met with the Ephesian elders and told them, warned them earlier, that from among your own selves, they're going to rise people teaching false things. Wolves in sheep's clothing. We got to get on about this importance of knowing and teaching sound doctrine. These letters demanded holy living by both the leaders and the church members. So in his day, it's so in our day. It gives us history about Paul and the church. And God speaks to us just as he spoke to them. Let's talk about the problem, the heresy that Timothy and others would have to face, called Gnosticism. Often you'll see it called incipient Gnosticism. It just beginning, just becoming an amalgamation. It's a super religion. Take a little bit of philosophy from Aristotle and Plato. Let's throw in there a little bit of mysticism from the Eastern mystery religions, and have these eons out there circulating in space and coming down, and these levels of maturity that we can rise to, and that'll really entice people. And then we got just Judaism thing here. Let's throw in some old law restrictions and dietary and things, and oh yeah, Jesus, we got to have him in there. And so let's just mix it all up. Throw it in a pot and see what we come out with. And that's kind of what the Gnostics did. And a lot of it sounded Jesus-like. My dad always said, rat poison is rarely the toxic ingredient. It's just a small percentage of what you got. But you get it and you're dead. These guys are good at interweaving truths, and aren't all false teachers good at that? Putting enough truth in there to make it sound appealing, plausible. Maybe that's the way it is. And it manifested because behind Gnosticism was this dualism. There are only two elements: God and the mind, matter and flesh. God and mind were good, matter, flesh, evil. And so what are we going to do about this? Because man is both, and since he's both, the flesh has contaminated his good part, and so he's evil. How are we going to get out of this situation if we believe this? Well, they approached it from two ways. We got to do something about this, so we'll say, you ought not marry. If you are married, just live as brother and sister. Celibacy is a better way, they say. And it is strange that you've got religious organizations today that still hold to that. And Paul calls them out on that here and says, don't let that be part of it. You got dietary restrictions. Don't eat any pork. Things you do. The other end of that spectrum, because you're punishing the flesh in asceticism and trying to purify the spirit that'll one day be free and eternal. The other extreme is antinomianism, which says, doesn't matter what I do, the flesh is evil, eat, drink, be merry, party on. Paul said in Romans, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. There is a consequence to the way we live in this life. We are to be a certain way. We are to be people that have some scruples, and so it's kind of a complicated thing. Before I hit that, let me do what I said I was going to do, and let's by all means get through the first three verses. 1 Timothy chapter 1. Verses 1 through 3. Paul, an apostle of Jesus Christ, by the commandment of God, our Savior, and the Lord Jesus Christ, our hope, grace, mercy, peace from God our Father and Jesus Christ our Lord. Verse 3, as I urged you when I went into Macedonia, remain in Ephesus, that you may charge some that they teach no other doctrine. There's some false doctrine going on. It was a strange heresy. It plagued the church during the first couple of centuries. It was just heating up in Timothy's day. And a couple of features: speculative intellectualism. Here's my family tree. There's what did Jesus look like? Did he have a body? What are we going to look like in heaven? Things that you don't have a Bible answer for, and they get all hung up on it. And then they'd be prideful. Most false teachers are pretty prideful in what they believe. Lesson is yours. Thank you for your good attention. And thank you guys up there for getting those things ironed out there. Joe had to do double duty.